Cheesy the Podcast, presented by Just Cheesy Productions.
Hi there, I'm your host, Fondue. In this week's episode, we're going to start talking about cheese in the holidays. We're also going to talk about how I might have to print a retraction about cheddar being the most dangerous of all the cheeses. We're going to talk about cream cheese delays and what that means for bagels.
What it means for bagels?
And we're also going to have a very cheesy joke. Stay tuned for the next episode of Just Cheesy the Podcast. So cheesy, in this week's episode, we're going to talk a little bit about Hanukkah and, of course, cheese.
I just can't get enough of talking about cheese.
Apparently, neither can I. So this year, it looks like Hanukkah started at sundown on Sunday, November 28th, and it goes until Monday, December 6th at sundown as well. I know fried foods have been traditional as far as Hanukkah foods, but I wanted to know if cheese was as well. And it looks like it is.
Why cheese and fried foods?
Well, the fried food part is pretty straightforward, Cheesy. The custom of eating fried foods during Hanukkah is meant to commemorate the miracle of a small flask of oil that kept the Second Temple's menorah alight for 8 days.
8 days?
That's right, Cheesy. 8 days. 8 days of eating fried foods like potato latkes and jam-filled donuts. I mean, what could be better?
Cheese?
Right. I'm sorry I was getting off track. This is a show about cheese. Let's learn a little bit about the cheese portion of Hanukkah. So some stories about Hanukkah include something more than just the deeds of the Maccabees. There is a woman named Judith.
Adult content warning.
If you have small children, this portion is pretty brutal, so I would warn you to be careful. So in the 2nd century BCE, the powerful Assyrian army invaded the Near East. The town of Bethulia was besieged by this cruel and domineering guy named Holofernes. He was the Assyrian Emperor Nebuchadnezzar's top general. So the whole country came under this Assyrian control. And as they were discouraged, the leaders agreed to surrender if they were not rescued within a few days. Judith was a young widow, and she was the most unlikely person to save them.
Why's that?
Well, probably because it was just her and her maid. So they set out for the enemy camp, and the bad guy, Holofernes, he was smitten with her beauty and invited her to essentially eat dinner with him. Now, she didn't want to eat the food of the enemy king, so she brought some of her own. She brought things like dry fig cake and bread. So as the story goes, she shared some of her food with the general. And there was a super salty item in her bag, and it was guaranteed to make a general thirsty. You know what it was, Cheesy?
Ooh, yeah, cheese.
Right on, Cheesy. So Holofernes ate the cheese. He got thirsty. Judith gave him wine. Holofernes ate cheese, Judith gave him wine, and so on until he was completely drunk. And then, of course, because he was drunk and passed out, Judith took the sword off of his side and cut his head off.
I was not expecting that.
By the 14th century, there's a strong tradition that people ate cheese on Hanukkah. So this is why some people may eat cheese during the holiday to honor Judith.
That was quite the story.
Information about Judith and her story came from jwa.com, that's the Jewish Women's Archive. It came from Wikipedia, and it came from NPR article called A Hidden Hanukkah Tale of Women, an Army, and Some Killer Cheese. This sure would be a good time to take a break and hear a word from our sponsors. Just Cheesy the Podcast is sponsored by Just Cheesy Productions. If you missed the debut of the Grace Kelly Challenge on TikTok, then you've really missed out. Because cheesy could be brown, blue, violet sky, purple, or cheesy, or anything you like. Now back to the podcast. Here it comes, one of my favorite segments.
This week in cheese.
So, Cheesy, I feel like this is one of those episodes where maybe everything's just a smidge of bad news.
Uh-oh, why?
So, you know how there's been some significant shortages due to the supply chain issues that are happening?
Yes.
So, they're talking about a supply chain issue in New York that's going to cause a little bit of problems with, guess.
No, I don't want to.
Well, you would have guessed cream cheese.
I said no fondue.
Unfortunately, it's true. According to a story in the Business Insider, they're saying that a lot of New York bagel shop owners are hoarding cream cheese and crossing state lines for supply as dairy companies struggle to basically meet their demand.
What's that mean for me?
It means that Cousin Clay might be making more appearances for a little while here in the near future. And according to Kraft Heinz, the parent company of Philadelphia cream cheese, these shortages are tied to increased demand for several of their products, and it's partially driven by a rise in Americans eating from home during the pandemic, and a lot of people apparently hoard cream cheese during the holidays.
To make things like awesome, yummy cheese balls?
Ultimately, right now, it looks like it's just affecting New York and their bagel industry. It looks like, at least in the last 10, and some people even say in the last 30 years, they've never seen this big of a shortage.
Holy cow.
Isn't that the truth, Cheesy? So, Cheesy, are you ready for our first retraction as Just Cheesy the podcast?
Uh-oh. What'd we do?
We told a hilarious joke that said, why is cheddar considered the most dangerous of all the cheeses?
Because cheddar is very sharp.
Yeah, that's the one. And as funny as that is, cheddar is actually not the world's most dangerous cheese.
Duh.
But there is a most dangerous cheese.
Really? What would make a cheese dangerous?
Pyophila caseae, better known as cheese flies.
Cheese fries?
No, you heard me right. Cheese flies, F-L-I-E-S.
Ew, okay.
So the website alwaysfreshnews.com quotes a CNN travel article about this Italian island of Sardinia, and it sits in the middle of the sea, and it's beautiful, and it's surrounded by coastland and beaches, and they're known for this
Gross bug cheese?
Guinness World Record proclaimed most dangerous cheese in the world, and it's called Casu Marzu. It's essentially a worm-infested cheese.
Yeah.
They have the cheese flies. They lay their eggs in the cracks that form in the cheese. The worms hatch. They work their way through the middle, and they digest proteins, and they process them, and they turn it into a smooth, creamy cheese.
Okay, that sounds pretty bad.
Oh, I'm not done.
Why?
Because after the worms make their way through and make that smooth, creamy cheese, the cheesemaker opens the top, which has basically barely been touched by the worms. And when he opens the top, this is not a time for the weak, it says here, and I'm quoting, "At this point, the larvae inside begin to squirm frantically." Some of the locals spin it in a centrifuge to fuse the worms with the cheese, and some like it naturally where they just open their mouths, eat everything. And they say the taste has hints of grass and a spicy aftertaste that lingers for hours. And what makes it dangerous is that the worms could survive the bite.
I gotta be honest, I'm out.
You got that right, yeah.
I wouldn't be eating that.
Yeah. The worms could survive the bite and create a problem in your intestines, but so far this hasn't been linked to Casu Marzu. Technically, this cheese is illegal and has been since 1962, and this is due to laws prohibiting the consumption of parasite-infected food.
Yay, laws.
In recent years, the European Union has begun to study and revive the notion of eating larvae, because in some places insects are raised for consumption, and this is considered potentially a way to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and help alleviate the climate crisis. So I guess you could say this is a green food.
Yeah, ew, green.
So what do you say we go to a joke?
How can you tell when a cheese has been going to the gym?
I have no idea.
When it's really shredded. Get it? Shredded.
That's so silly.
Nope, it's a little bit cheesy.
Thanks for joining us at Just Cheesy the Podcast. Join us next week for episode number 5.
Stay cheesy, everybody.